The rain poured down in torrents, thunder rumbling through the night. George lay in a pool of blood in the abandoned factory, a dagger embedded in his chest, blood gushing out relentlessly. "George, I'm sorry." Mary knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face, yet the dagger remained tightly gripped in her hand. "Why?" George managed to utter the word, his eyes filled with confusion and despair. Since childhood, Mary had been his fiancée. They grew up together, their bond deep and unshakable. He had believed the greatest happiness in his life would be growing old with her. But now, the one who had stabbed him was the woman he loved most. "Because the one I love isn't you," Mary sobbed, her face drenched in tears. "It's always been Mike. Always." Mike stepped out from the shadows, his expression cold as he looked down at the dying George. "Cousin, don't blame me for being ruthless. The Grant family's fortune was always meant to be mine. Grandfather passed the family leadership to you, handed you the company. Why? Just because you're the legitimate heir, and I'm the bastard?" Mike's voice dripped with venom. "Now, with you gone, the Grant Empire will finally be mine." George's eyes widened as everything became clear. It had all been a conspiracy. The company's recent troubles, plummeting stock prices, partners withdrawing investments, had all been orchestrated by them. The rumors about him embezzling company funds, keeping mistresses, all spread by their hands. Even the look of disappointment in grandfather's eyes before his death, his words about reconsidering the heir, all because of their manipulations. "And about Lily, you'll never know the truth," Mary sneered. "Did you really think she was innocent? That she truly saw you as a brother?" George's heart lurched. Lily, the girl the Grant family had adopted, the sweet and obedient one who always called him Big Brother George. "Lily, she was ours," Mike smirked triumphantly. "She's been mine since she was 15. All these years, she's been our spy, reporting your every move. Did you really think it was coincidence how she always showed up when you needed help? That she just understood you so well? Because we planned it all." A deafening clap of thunder split the sky, illuminating George's face, now twisted in despair. His entire 26 years of life had been nothing but a cruel joke. The love he thought was real, the family bonds he cherished, all lies. He had lived in a web of deception, foolishly believing himself the victor. Though that bitch Lily started getting disobedient recently, Mary spat viciously. "She actually said she couldn't bear to see you die. So, we decided to let her join you." Mike pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Do it." Minutes later, the phone rang. "Young master, Miss Lily has been dealt with." George's tears mingled with the blood on his face. Lily was dead too. The girl who had followed him since childhood, calling him brother, the one who said her greatest wish was to stay by his side forever. She was gone. Whether she had been friend or foe, in the end, she had chosen him. But now it was too late. "George, when you're reborn, remember to open your eyes." Mary stood up, looking down at him with cold disdain. "Don't be so stupid next time." With that, she and Mike walked away without looking back. The factory was left with only George, raindrops from the broken roof falling onto his face. His consciousness grew increasingly hazy, and the world before him began to spin. Just as he thought he was about to die, a voice suddenly echoed in his mind, detecting the host's intense desire for vengeance. "System activated. Congratulations, host. You have acquired the blood for blood system. Do you accept?" George mustered his last ounce of strength and roared inwardly, "Accept. System binding successful. Host will now be granted a chance at rebirth. Mission: make all who betrayed you pay the price. Reward upon completion: true rebirth. Penalty for failure: eternal erasure." A blinding white light flashed, and George's consciousness plunged into darkness. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself lying on an unfamiliar bed. The room was luxuriously decorated, and sunlight streamed in through the window. A mirror rested on the nightstand, and a reflection in it made his eyes widen in shock. It was a completely unfamiliar face, handsome and dignified, but definitely not his own. Host has successfully been reborn. New identity. Patton, the third young master of the Venus family. Age 25. The system's voice rang out again. The original body became a vegetable due to a car accident. The host has now taken over its consciousness. Your former identity, George, has been declared dead. You may now begin your vengeance plan. Patton, no, it was George, slowly sat up. He examined his hands, feeling the strength and youth of this new body. The flames of vengeance burned fiercely in his heart. Mike, Mary, and all those who had caused his and Lily's deaths, just you wait. This game has only just begun. The Venus family, one of the four great noble houses of Cloud City. Through the system, George learned that his new identity, Patton, was the most beloved third grandson of the Venus family patriarch. Gifted from childhood with exceptional intelligence and business acumen, Patton had been in a vegetative state for 3 months after a car accident, with everyone believing he would never wake up. Now that he had awakened, the entire Venus family was in an uproar. Patton! A middle-aged woman in a cheapao rushed into the hospital room, tears streaming down her face. Mom thought she'd never see you again. This was Patton's mother, Lady Samantha Venus. Mom, George quickly adapted to his role, gripping her hand tightly. I'm sorry for worrying you. Just waking up is enough. Samantha sobbed uncontrollably. The doctor said you might never regain consciousness. Mom nearly went mad. Soon, Patton's father, Marcus, also arrived at the hospital. You brat, finally decided to wake up? Marcus scolded, though his eyes brimmed with tears. Dad, father and son embraced tightly. In that moment, George felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in a long time, familial love. This was something he had never known in the Grant family. Even his own grandfather had always regarded him with scrutiny and evaluation, never with such pure affection. Oh, I have good news for you, Marcus said with a smile. Just yesterday, I closed a major deal on your behalf. What deal? The acquisition of Grant Group. George's heart skipped a beat. Grant Group? Yes, the former top family of Cloud City. But they've fallen from grace now. Marcus shook his head. How fortunes change. Back in the day, Patriarch Grant was so formidable, and now his grandson has driven the company into the ground. Stock prices have dropped by 70%. I heard that George, the Grant family heir, died unexpectedly recently. Now his cousin Mike has taken over the company. This Mike is incompetent and desperate to cash out, so he agreed to sell the company to us at 30% of its value. Marcus smirked proudly. Once you've recovered, the company will be handed over to you to manage. Perfect for you to cut your teeth. George clenched his fists, suppressing the fury in his heart. 30% of its value? The business empire he built with his own hands. Sold off for scraps? Dad, I have a question. Why is Mike in such a hurry to sell? Debt problems, Marcus said. Grant Group's cash flow has dried up recently. The banks are demanding repayment, and several major shareholders are pushing to withdraw. Mike has no choice but to sell the company to settle the debts. Rumor has it, all these troubles were caused by that George. They say he was reckless with money while he was alive, even embezzling company funds to keep mistresses. Turned the once great Grant Group into a complete mess. George sneered. Embezzlement? Mistresses? These baseless accusations had spread so far. Seems Mike hadn't been idle these past 3 months. He'd been busy smearing George's name. Dad, I want to be involved in the acquisition personally, George said. You've just recovered. You should rest a few more days, Samantha said worriedly. Mom, I'm fine. Lying around in the hospital won't help. I'd rather keep busy. Consider it part of my rehab. Marcus nodded. Fine. Then tomorrow, you'll come with me to meet Mike and sign the acquisition contract. Got it, George agreed, his mind already forming a plan for revenge. Mike, since you're so eager to sell Grant Group, I'll let you have your way. But did you really think selling the company would let you live in luxury? You're wrong. This is only the beginning of your nightmare. That night, alone in his hospital room, George used the system to review everything Mike had done over the past 3 months. Just as expected, after George's death, Mike had immediately taken over Grant Group and begun frantically siphoning off assets. On the surface, Grant Group was struggling due to mismanagement. In reality, Mike had long since transferred the core assets to his private company. What he was selling to the Venus family was just an empty shell. As for Mary, she was now Mike's fiancée, with their wedding planned for next month. Lily's death had been staged as a suicide. Everyone believed she had taken her own life out of grief for George. Some even praised her as a devoted, tragic lover. As George read through the records, his fury erupted like a volcano. System, I want them to pay. Host's desire for vengeance has been detected. First mission issued. Ruin Mike's reputation in front of everyone. Time limit, 7 days. Reward, acquisition of special skill. Failure penalty, tenfold pain backlash. 7 days? George sneered. It wouldn't take 7 days. Tomorrow, when they met, would be Mike's last day. The next morning, at the headquarters of Venus Group, George followed Marcus into the conference room, ready to formally sign the acquisition contract with Mike. When the door opened, George saw the familiar figure. Mike, his cousin, the man who had killed him. At this moment, Mike was brimming with confidence, dressed in a tailored suit, his hair impeccably groomed, showing not a trace of guilt. President Marcus, I've long admired your reputation. Mike extended his hand first. President Mike, you flatter me. Marcus shook his hand and then introduced, this is my son Patton. From now on, Grant Group will be under his management. Mike's gaze fell on George, a flicker of confusion flashing in his eyes. For some reason, this Patton gave him a strange feeling, as if he'd seen him somewhere before. Young Master Patton, a pleasure, Mike extended his hand. George looked at this hand. The same hand that had once been stained with his blood, and wished he could chop it off right then. But he restrained himself. President Mike, the pleasure is mine. He calmly shook Mike's hand. The moment their hands touched, Mike shuddered. Patton's hand was as cold as iron, his grip terrifyingly strong, as if he wanted to crush Mike's bones. Even more frightening was the look in Patton's eyes, filled with an indescribable hatred. But how could that be? This was their first meeting. President Mike, you don't look well. Are you feeling unwell? George asked with feigned concern. And no, I'm fine, Mike forced a smile. Probably just tired lately. Then let's get down to business, Marcus said. We've reviewed the contract and found no issues. What will be a good time for you to sign, President Mike? Right now is fine, Mike said eagerly. He desperately needed the money to plug the holes. On the surface, he was the new leader of Grant Group, basking in glory. In reality, the company's financial situation was far worse than outsiders imagined. If he didn't cash out soon, the funding chain could collapse. Good, let's sign then. Just as Mike picked up the pen to sign, George suddenly spoke. Wait. Everyone turned to look at him. What is it, Patton? Marcus asked. Dad, I think there's still room for negotiation on the price, George said coolly. What? Mike's eyes widened. Young Master Patton, we already agreed on the price earlier. How can you? Don't rush, President Mike, George interrupted. In business, it's always about getting the best deal. The Venus family may be wealthy, but we're not fools. What do you mean? Mike's expression darkened. Last night, I carefully reviewed Grant Group's financial statements and found some interesting issues. George pulled a document from his briefcase and placed it gently on the table. For example, 3 of Grant Group's core properties were sold at extremely low prices 2 months ago. For example, $500 million in liquid assets mysteriously vanished from the company's accounts a month ago. For example, several core subsidiaries of Grant Group recently underwent changes in their equity structure. Mike's face grew increasingly pale. How could Patton possibly know these things? These were secrets he had meticulously concealed, impossible for outsiders to uncover. Patton, what do you mean by this? Mike forced himself to speak. These are standard business operations. Standard? George sneered. Then let me mention a few more standard operations. President Mike recently established a new company called Mike Investment with a registered capital of $500 million. The primary business of this company is acquiring the high-quality assets Grant Group has been selling off. In other words, President Mike is selling assets from his left hand to his right, then passing the hollowed-out shell to us. This kind of business is something our Venus family dares not engage in. The meeting room fell dead silent. Marcus stared at his son in shock, never expecting him to uncover so much. Mike trembled uncontrollably, beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. It was over. Everything had been exposed. "Patton, you must have misunderstood something," Mike stammered. "I can explain these matters. No need for explanations." George stood up, looking down at him. "President Mike, a person must have principles. Did you think killing George would let you take control of everything? Did you think hollowing out the company would allow you to escape unscathed? You were wrong." Mike jerked his head up, wide-eyed as he stared at George. Killing George? How did Patton know about this? No one except him and Mary knew George had been murdered by them. The outside world believed George had died in an accident. Why would Patton use the word killed? "You? Who are you?" Mike asked, shaking. George slowly leaned down and whispered in his ear, "I am your eternal nightmare." Mike, like a startled bird, leaped up from his chair. "Impossible. This can't be," he cried out. "George is dead. I saw him die with my own eyes." The others in the meeting room froze. Marcus frowned at Mike. "President Mike, what are you talking about?" Only then did Mike realize he had slipped up, his face turning deathly pale. I meant, you saw George die with your own eyes?" George asked coldly. "President Mike, as far as I know, George died in a car crash in the suburbs. He was alone at the time. How could you, his cousin, have witnessed it? Unless..." George's voice was like a summons from hell. "You were there." Mike panicked completely, his mind in chaos. How could Patton know so much? Who was he, really? I was just speaking carelessly. Mike babbled incoherently. "Oh." George pulled a phone from his pocket. "Then how do you explain this recording?" He pressed play, and a clear conversation echoed through the meeting room. "Cousin, don't blame me for being ruthless. The Grant family's assets were always meant to be mine. Grandfather passed the family leadership to you, handed the company to you. Why? Just because you're the legitimate heir, and I'm a bastard? Now it's perfect. With you dead, the Grant family will be mine." These were Mike's words in the abandoned factory. But at the time, aside from him, Mary, and the barely alive George, there was no fourth person present. Where did this recording come from? "No, this is fake." Mike screamed hysterically. "This is a fabricated recording." "Is that so?" George pulled out a photo. "Then what about this picture?" In the photo, Mike was holding a blood-stained dagger. Mary was kneeling beside him, and a person lay in a pool of blood on the ground. Though the image was slightly blurred, the faces of all three were clearly recognizable. Marcus stared at the photo in shock before slamming the table in fury. "Mike, you killed your own cousin." "No, that's not what happened." Mike completely lost control. "He's not dead. George isn't dead. He is George." He pointed at George, his eyes filled with terror. "You are George. You're here for revenge. You're a ghost. A ghost." The others in the meeting room were stunned by Mike's frenzied state. Marcus immediately pressed the intercom. "Security! Restrain Mike now. Call the police." Soon, security rushed in and pinned Mike down. "Let me go. He's George. He's a ghost." Mike continued to scream wildly, but no one believed him. To everyone else, this was merely the deranged outburst of a murderer caught red-handed. The police arrived quickly and took Mike away. As he was dragged out of the meeting room, George whispered in his ear, "This is just the beginning. Next, it's Mary's turn." Mike's eyes widened, desperate to speak, but his mouth was sealed with tape. He could only stare at George, his terror bottomless. After Mike was taken away, Marcus said shakily, "I never imagined Mike was a murderer. Thank goodness you uncovered this early, Patton, or we would have been doing business with a killer." "Dad, with Mike arrested and the Grant Group leaderless, now is the perfect time for a takeover," George said. "You're right." Marcus nodded. I'll contact the other shareholders of Grant Group immediately and offer to buy their shares at a fair price. With this evidence, they'll be eager to sell. George nodded in satisfaction. Step 1 of the plan, success. Mike was disgraced and imprisoned. But this was far from enough. The true revenge had only just begun. The system's voice echoed in his mind. Congratulations, host, on completing the first task. Reward, special skill, mind reading. Now issuing the second task. Make Mary an outcast. Time limit, 3 days. Mind reading? A glint of excitement flashed in George's eyes. With this skill, the next phase of revenge would be even easier. Mary, are you ready? That afternoon, Mary was at home trying on her wedding dress. Her wedding with Mike was scheduled in a week, and everything was already prepared. The thought of soon becoming the mistress of the Grant family filled her with smug satisfaction. Although killing George had left her with some guilt, the thought of the impending wealth and status quickly dispelled that remorse. You look absolutely stunning today, miss, the maid complimented. Doi. Mary twirled in front of the mirror, the white wedding dress making her look like an angel. Who would have thought that such a beautiful angel was, in fact, a murderer? Just then, the doorbell rang. Miss, you have a visitor, the butler announced. Who? It's young Master Patton from the Venus family. Mary froze. Patton? The third son of the Venus family? What was he doing here? She had never had any dealings with the Venus family before. Show him in. Soon, George entered the living room. The moment Mary saw him, her heart skipped a beat. For some reason, this Patton gave her an inexplicable sense of familiarity, as if she had met him somewhere before. Especially his gaze, deep and cold, filled her with an inexplicable dread. Master Patton, it's a pleasure. Mary forced a smile and extended her hand. Miss Mary, I've heard so much about you. George shook her hand and activated his mind-reading ability. Instantly, Mary's thoughts flooded into his mind like a tidal wave. This Patton is so strange. Why does his stare feel so terrifying? Why is he here? Did he find out something? Impossible. Only Mike and I know about George's death. No outsider could have discovered it. And now that Mike is the head of Grant Group, the Venus family wouldn't dare provoke us. George smirked coldly. As expected, this woman felt not an ounce of guilt. Her mind was solely occupied with covering up her crime. Miss Mary, congratulations on your upcoming marriage to President Mike, he said with a superficial smile. Thank you. Mary relaxed slightly. But surely Master Patton didn't come all this way just to offer congratulations? There is indeed something I'd like to discuss with you. George took a seat on the sofa. About Mike. Mary's heart lurched. What about Mike? He's been arrested. What? Mary's face instantly turned deathly pale. Arrested? What? For murder, George said calmly. He killed George. Boom. Mary felt as if she had been struck by lightning, her body swaying unsteadily. It was over. Everything was over. How had they been found out? They had been so careful. How could there possibly be evidence? Master Patton, you must be mistaken. Mary forced herself to speak. How could Mike kill George? They were cousins. Is that so? George took out his phone and played the recording. The moment Mike's voice rang out, Mary was utterly devastated. She knew that recording all too well. It was their conversation in the abandoned factory. But there had been no third person present at the time. How had this recording been made? Not only that, the police also have crime scene photos, George added, pulling out the bloody photograph. Seeing herself in the picture, Mary completely broke down. That's impossible. No one took photos, she screamed involuntarily. The moment the words left her mouth, she realized she had slipped up again. No one took photos? George sneered. Miss Mary, how do you know what happened back then? Mary stammered incoherently. Unless you were there too. George stood up and walked toward her step by step. Mary, 3 years ago, you told George that the happiest thing in your life would be marrying him. 2 years ago, you told George that no matter what difficulties you faced, you'd stay by his side. A year ago, you told George you loved him more than your own life. But 3 months ago, You killed him with your own hands. Mary's eyes widened, her entire body trembling. She had indeed said those words to George. But how did Patton know? These were private conversations, never shared with outsiders. Who are you? Mary asked, shaking. George slowly leaned down and whispered in her ear, I am the avenger of the man you killed. Mary, the game has begun. Mary collapsed onto the floor in terror, her eyes filled with fear. You're not Patton. Who are you? George ignored her question and continued. Mary, do you know what George regretted most before he died? It wasn't Mike's betrayal or his own failure. It was ever loving someone like you so deeply. He said if there was a next life, he'd never fall for a viper like you again. Tears streamed down Mary's face, whether from fear or guilt, she didn't know. I was forced. She sobbed. Mike threatened me, said he'd kill my whole family if I didn't help him. Really? George sneered. Then let me play another recording for you. He took out his phone and played another clip. George, I'm sorry. Why? Because the one I love isn't you. It's Mike, always has been. These were Mary's own words, spoken in the abandoned factory. Hearing her voice, Mary was utterly crushed. Every lie had been exposed. Hear that? George said coldly. You weren't threatened. You chose this. You never loved George. It was Mike all along. To be with Mike, you chose betrayal and murder. Mary stopped making excuses. The evidence was undeniable. Since you know everything, what do you want? She wiped her tears, regaining a sliver of composure. Are you going to send me to prison too? No. George shook his head. Prison would be too easy for you. I want you to experience the taste of being abandoned by everyone. I want you to lose everything, just like George did. With that, he dialed a number on his phone. Hello, Cloud City TV? I have an expose. The call connected quickly. Yes, it's about Mary. She's implicated in George's murder. I have audio and photo evidence. Mary's face paled. She tried to stop him, but it was too late. What? How much? $1 million? Fine, I'll transfer it now. After hanging up, George dialed another number. Hello, Cloud City Daily? After making several phone calls in a row, George had contacted all the major media outlets in Cloud City. Mary looked at him in despair, knowing she was finished. Once these recordings and photos were exposed by the media, she would become a public enemy, despised by everyone. Why are you doing this to me? She sobbed. We have no grudge between us. No gray. George's eyes burned with hatred. Mary, do you really think killing someone is something you can just walk away from? Do you really believe death is the end, that there's no retribution? You're wrong. Some debts must be repaid, even in death. Some grudges must be avenged across lifetimes. Just then, Mary's phone rang. It was her father. Mary, where are you? Come home now. Her father's frantic voice came through the phone. Dad, what's wrong? Reporters are at the house. They're saying you killed George. What's going on? Mary's heart turned to ash. The media had moved so quickly. They'd already tracked down her family. Dad, come back and explain this immediately. There are reporters swarming the front door, and the neighbors are all talking. The call ended. Mary glared at George, her eyes filled with venom. Who are you, really? Why are you ruining me? George didn't answer. Instead, he made another call, this time to Mary's company. Hello, is this Star Media? I'd like to report that your signed artist, Mary, is suspected of murder. Mary was a moderately famous model in Cloud City, signed under Star Media. If the company found out she was involved in a murder, they would undoubtedly terminate her contract immediately. Sure enough, within minutes, her agent called. Mary, get to the company right now. The boss wants to see you. Sis, what's going on? Your name is all over the internet. They're saying you killed George. The company is in chaos. The boss said if you can't give a reasonable explanation, they'll terminate your contract on the spot. Mary hung up in despair. Everything was over. Her family, her friends, her career, all of it was slipping away. This was what George had meant by abandoned by all. Are you satisfied now? She spat at him. This is just the beginning, George sneered. The Real show hasn't even started. Mary, you like betrayal, don't you? Then I'll let you experience what it's like to be betrayed by everyone. Over the next few hours, Mary endured the darkest moments of her life. First came the overwhelming media coverage, painting her as a gold-digging traitor who had betrayed love for money. Then came the termination notice from her company. Star Media swiftly cut ties with her to protect its own reputation. Next, her friends distanced themselves, with former best friends deleting photos of her from their social media. Finally, her family's doubt. Though her parents hadn't outright disowned her, their words were laced with disappointment and suspicion. Mary sat in her empty home, scrolling through the endless stream of hateful comments on her phone, her heart numb. Mary, you murderer! Killing your own boyfriend for money? You're worse than an animal. She deserves the death penalty. Rid the world of this evil, disgusting woman. Looks like an angel, but her heart is more poisonous than a snake's. Each comment stabbed in her heart like a knife. Even more terrifying was that someone had already dug up her home address, and angry netizens were beginning to gather downstairs. Mary, come out and face your death. A life for a life. Monster, get out of Cloud City. The shouts from below grew louder as Mary trembled in her room. Just then, the doorbell rang. Thinking it was the furious mob, she was too scared to answer. But the doorbell kept ringing incessantly, followed by knocking. Mary, I know you're home. Open the door. The voice was familiar. It was George. Mary hesitated, but finally opened the door. George stood outside, his expression unreadable. How does it feel? He asked. Are you satisfied now? Mary spat bitterly. I've lost everything. Isn't your revenge enough? Enough. George sneered. Mary, you're underestimating the weight of your sins. Do you know what George gave up for you? How many noble women he turned down just to be with his childhood sweetheart? He put 30% of Grant Group's shares in your name as a dowry. He even planned to give you the family's heirloom jade bracelet, passed down for 3 generations. And how did you repay him? You cheated with his cousin and then killed him with your own hands. Mary listened, tears streaming down her face. She knew how good George had been to her and how cruel her actions were. But it was too late for regrets. I know I was wrong, but it's too late now, she sobbed. Do whatever you want of me, but please spare my family. Spare your family? A mocking glint flashed in George's eyes. Mary, do you think I'd slaughter the innocent like you? Your family is innocent. I won't lay a finger on them. But you must pay the price. With that, he took out his phone and dialed a number. Hello, police. I'd like to report a murder. Mary's face paled. You're calling the police? Yes, George said coldly. Mary, the game is over. It's time for you to go to prison. Soon, the sound of police sirens echoed from below. Mary looked out the window in despair, knowing her doom had arrived. Minutes later, the police knocked on the door. Police, open up. Mary stared at George and asked one final question. Who are you, really? George didn't answer. Instead, he said calmly, some people return from death to claim what's owed. Some debts can only be repaid in blood. The door was kicked open, and officers stormed in. Mary, you're under arrest for intentional homicide. As the cold handcuffs clamped around her wrists, Mary cast one last glance at George. His eyes were as deep as the ocean, as cold as ice, like the judgment of hell itself. The moment Mary was taken away, a mechanical voice echoed in George's mind. Congratulations, host. Second task completed. Reward, photographic memory. Now issuing third task, avenge Lily. Time limit, 5 days. A trace of tenderness flickered in George's eyes. Lily, just wait. Your brother will avenge you soon. None of those who killed you will escape. Lily's grave is located in Green Mountain Cemetery on the western outskirts of Cloud City. It's a peaceful and serene place, shaded by lush trees and filled with birdsong and floral fragrance. But for George, this place remains an eternal wound in his heart. Holding a bouquet of white chrysanthemums, he slowly approaches Lily's tombstone. On the stone, Lily's sweet smile appears exceptionally warm under the sunlight. Below the photo are engraved words. Lily, 1998 to 2024, May there be no pain in heaven. George gently places the flowers before the tombstone and kneels down. Lily, your brother is here to see you, he whispers. I'm sorry for making you wait so long. Brother has already avenged you in part. Mike and Mary have received the punishment they deserved. But it's not enough yet. Others still need to pay. A soft breeze brushes past, as if Lily is responding to him. George closes his eyes, recalling every precious moment he shared with her. 10 years ago, 8-year-old Lily was adopted by the Grant family. Back then, she was thin, small, and timid, like a frightened fawn. It was George who took the initiative, holding her hand and introducing her to everyone in the family, helping her adjust to her new surroundings. From that moment on, Lily became his most important little sister. She would sneak him midnight snacks when he worked late. She would sing to him in her childish voice when he was in a bad mood. She would stay by his bedside, caring for him when he was sick. For 10 years, Lily was like his shadow, always by his side. He thought this companionship would last a lifetime, until 3 months ago, when he learned the truth. Lily had been threatened by Mike and Mary, forced to become their spy. All these years, he had never known about her suffering and struggles. In the end, she chose to stand by his side, and paid for it with her life. Lily, do you know? George chokes out, what I regret most isn't their betrayal, but failing to protect you. If only I had discovered their schemes sooner, you wouldn't have died. If only I had been more attentive, I could have seen your pain. It's all my fault. Just then, a voice speaks behind him. Young Master George? George turns to see a plainly dressed, middle-aged woman. She looks familiar, but he can't recall where he's seen her before. Who are you? He asks, standing up. I'm Mrs. Liu. I used to work as a maid for the Grant family, the woman says. You may not remember me. I only worked there for a year before leaving. George remembers now. There was indeed such a person. But her name wasn't Mrs. Liu. It was Mrs. Wong, and she left the Grant family 5 years ago. Why is she appearing only now? Most importantly, why is she at Lily's grave? Mrs. Wong, what are you doing here? George asks warily. The woman's expression darkens. Clearly, she didn't expect George to remember her real name. I came to visit Miss Lily. She forces a smile. I heard she passed away, so I came to pay my respects. Oh, George activated his mind-reading ability and instantly grasped her thoughts. It's over. I've been exposed. I didn't expect George to still be alive and remember me. The boss said he was dead and sent me to confirm at the cemetery, but I ran into the real deal. What should I do? Should I proceed with the plan? No, this is a public cemetery. Too many people. George was startled. This woman had come to verify whether he was truly dead, and she had a boss behind her. Mrs. Wong, who is your boss? George asked directly. What boss? I don't understand what you're talking about. Mrs. Wong feigned ignorance, but her thoughts betrayed her. I absolutely cannot reveal that Steve sent me. If this gets out, my whole family is finished. Steve? George frowned, quickly recalling a name. Steve, the deputy general manager of Grant Group, Mike's right-hand man. After Mike took over Grant Group, Steve became the de facto manager. It seemed others besides Mike and Mary were involved in this conspiracy. Mrs. Wong, I advise you to tell the truth, George said coldly, or face the consequences. Mrs. Wong nervously took a few steps back. Young Master George, I really don't know what you're talking about. I just came to pay respects to Miss Lily. Since you refuse to talk, I'll find out myself. George pulled out his phone. I'm sure Steve will be happy to explain. Hearing Steve's name, Mrs. Wong's face turned deathly pale. How do you know Steve? Because I know everything. George advanced toward her, including how you killed Lily. Mrs. Wong panicked completely, dropping to her knees and begging for mercy. Young Master George, I was wrong. I was truly wrong. It was all Steve's doing. He threatened to kill my family if I didn't obey. Please spare me. I have elders and children to care for. I can't die. George looked down at her imperiously. Then tell me, how did Lily really die? Trembling, Mrs. Wong revealed the truth. Lily hadn't committed suicide. She was murdered by Steve's orders. After George died, Lily had confronted Mike, demanding answers about George's death. Though Lily had indeed been coerced into spying before, her feelings for George were genuine. When she realized George was truly dead, she regretted everything and wanted to expose Mike to the police. But how could Mike let her live? So he ordered Steve to eliminate her and stage it as a suicide. Miss Lily died horribly, Mrs. Wong sobbed. They tortured her first, trying to extract any last words you might have left. Then they pushed her off the building, making it look like she jumped. George clenched his fists, his eyes burning with hatred. He had known Lily would never take her own life. Given her nature, she would have endured any pain to keep living. She had been murdered. Where is Steve now? He demanded through gritted teeth. In the CEO's office at Grant Group Tower, Mrs. Wong stammered. Good. George stood up. Call Steve now. Tell him it's confirmed. George is dead, so he can rest easy. Then arrange to meet him tonight in the suburbs. Say you have important information to report. If you dare play any tricks, I guarantee your entire family will suffer. Mrs. Wong didn't dare refuse. Trembling, she dialed Steve's number. Steve, it's me. It's confirmed. George is really dead. The one lying in the grave is him. What? You want to see me? Fine, 9 p.m., the usual spot. After hanging up, Mrs. Wong looked at George. Young Master George, I've done as you asked. Please spare me. Get out, George said coldly. If I find out you've told anyone about today, I'll make you wish you were dead. Mrs. Wong fled as if granted a pardon, scrambling away in terror. George turned to Lily's tombstone and whispered, Lily, tonight your brother will avenge you. That Steve will pay for his crimes. At 9 p.m. that night, in an abandoned factory on the outskirts, the very place where George had been killed and the usual spot Mrs. Wong mentioned. Steve arrived early, pacing restlessly inside the factory. A middle-aged man in his 40s, unremarkable in appearance but with a sinister glint in his eyes. Why isn't Mrs. Wong here yet? He checked his watch impatiently. Just then, footsteps echoed from outside. Steve, a voice called from behind him. Steve turned and saw a young man walking in. Who are you? Where's Mrs. Wong? He asked warily. Mrs. Wong couldn't make it. She sent me in her place, George said, stepping closer. Her place. Steve frowned. Who are you? I'm George. Steve froze as if struck by lightning, staring wide-eyed at George. Impossible. George is dead. I confirmed it myself. Is that so? George smirked. Then what you're seeing now, am I a man or a ghost? Steve trembled, his instincts screaming at him to run. But George was faster, grabbing him by the collar. Steve, 3 months ago, you killed Lily with your own hands. Tonight, it's time to pay with your life. It wasn't me. I didn't kill her. Steve shrieked hysterically. It was Mike's orders. I was just following commands. Following commands? George's eyes burned with fury. Did you hear Lily's pleas when you tortured her? Did you see the despair in her eyes when you pushed her off that building? A 19-year-old girl, what did she ever do wrong? Why did you do this to her? Steve was paralyzed by George's rage, unable to speak. Answer me, George roared. She knew too much. Steve stammered. If we didn't kill her, our plan would have been exposed. So you killed her? We didn't want to either, but we had no choice. Slap. George struck Steve across the face, sending blood spilling from his mouth. No choice. He laughed bitterly in fury. Steve, do you know what Lily's last words were? She said she regretted it. Regretted betraying George. She said if given the chance, she'd trade her own life to bring George back. But what did you do to such a kind girl? You tortured her, humiliated her, and finally pushed her off the building. George's voice thundered like a storm. Today I'll send every last one of you to hell to keep her company. Steve slumped to the ground, staring at George in terror. The man before him burned with fury straight from the depths of hell, as if George's vengeful spirit had truly returned. What do you want? He stammered. I want the names of everyone involved in Lily's death, George said coldly. Every single one. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything. Steve blurted. Besides me, there were 3 others, Lee, Massachusetts, and Zhang. They were Mike's men. The four of us carried out the operation that night. Details, George demanded. Steve swallowed hard, trembling as he spoke. That night, Lily came to Mike threatening to go to the police. Mike called me and ordered me to take care of her. The four of us lured her to this factory, and then he hesitated, too afraid to continue. And then George's voice was like an icy wind from the abyss. Then we tried to force her to reveal your last words, to see if you'd left any evidence against us. But she refused to say anything. She just kept crying, swearing she'd avenge you. Lee slapped her a few times to make her talk. Then Ma said, since we were going to kill her anyway, we might as well have some fun first. And then, smack, George struck Steve again, harder this time, knocking out 2 of his teeth. Animals, he roared. What did you do to Lily? We didn't actually do anything. Steve whimpered, pissing himself in fear. We just scared her. You're lying. George grabbed him by the hair. I saw Lily's autopsy report. She was covered in bruises. Tell me, what did you really do to her? Under George's relentless pressure, Steve finally confessed the full truth. That night, they had indeed subjected Lily to brutal torture, desperate to extract George's supposed last words. But Lily refused to break, even in the face of death. Enraged, they pushed her off the building and staged it as a suicide. By the time Steve finished, George's eyes held no trace of humanity. Only endless, cold-blooded fury. Good, he said icily. Now call those 3. Tell them there's an emergency and they need to come here immediately. Mr. George, I've told you everything. Please spare me. Steve begged through tears. Spare you? George sneered. Did you spare Lily? Tonight. None of you 4 are leaving this place alive. Defeated, Steve dialed Lee's number under George's glare. Lee, get to the factory now. Emergency. What kind of emergency? George might still be alive. Hurry. Soon. Lee arrived with Ma and Zhang in tow. When they saw George, they froze, certain they were staring at a ghost. Boss, what the hell is this? Lee asked shakily. It's George. Steve pointed. He's alive. Impossible. Ma screamed. We saw him die with our own eyes. Then who is standing before you now? George stepped toward them. The 4 of them huddled together, trembling in fear. Which one of you 4 struck Lily first? George asked. No one dared to answer. Since no one will speak, I'll take you one by one. George pulled a dagger from his pocket, the very same one Mike had used to kill him. Lee, you first. No, please. Lee tried to run, but George was faster. A single slash severed the tendons in Lee's hand. This is for Lily. Steve, your turn. Mr. George, I was wrong. I swear I was wrong. Steve kowtowed on the ground. But George showed no mercy. Another slash fell. Next were Ma and Zhang. Before George, the 4 of them were like lambs to the slaughter, powerless to resist. Finally, when it was all over, George looked at the 4 corpses on the ground. The hatred in his heart had finally been somewhat appeased. Lily, everyone who hurt you is dead now, he whispered. You can rest in peace. Just then, the system's voice echoed in his mind. Congratulations, host, on completing the 3rd mission. Special skill acquired. Mind control. Congratulations, host, on completing all revenge missions. You will soon be granted a new life. However, there is one hidden mission remaining. What hidden mission? George asked. Revive Lily. George's heart skipped a beat. What? Lily can be brought back. Yes, as long as the host is willing to pay the price, Lily can be resurrected. What price? Your lifespan. 10 years of your life in exchange for Lily's rebirth. Without hesitation, George answered, I agree. Transaction confirmed. 10 years deducted. Lily will be revived in 3 days. Location, Green Mountain Cemetery. 3 days later, Green Mountain Cemetery. George, holding a bouquet of flowers, stood once more before Lily's grave. The moment he placed the flowers down, a miracle occurred. From behind the tombstone, a familiar figure slowly emerged. Brother George. That sweet voice made tears stream down George's face instantly. Lily. He rushed forward and held her tightly, terrified this might just be a dream. "Brother, I'm back," Lily murmured in his embrace. "That's all that matters. That's all that matters," George choked out. "This time, I'll never let anyone hurt you again." From then on, the two left Cloud City and started anew in a place where no one knew them. Using the identity of the Venus family, George built a new business empire, and Lily stayed by his side, becoming his most important family. As for those who had once harmed them, they had all received their just deserts. Mike went insane in prison, babbling daily about ghosts haunting him. Mary was sentenced to life imprisonment, destined to rot behind bars. And the four who had killed Lily, they had vanished from this world forever. Justice may be late, but it is never absent.